podcast. I'm your host Tommy, aka Millsy, and pretty simple. I'm gonna go each game. It's gonna be a solo pod. It's just gonna be me. I'm gonna go game by game, talk about the plays I like, what I don't like. If it's a big name, if I'm fading them, why I'm fading them. Why I'm gonna have. If it's a smaller name, why I like them or why I'm going to play them this week. How much am I going to play them? Just kind of break it down from a DFS perspective. And I'm using Draftkings prices. So, if you do follow along or if you are listening and whatnot, will be I go off Draftkings. You can find me on Twitter at Millsy021, and you can follow the Nosebleed section on Twitter at TNBS021. And without further ado, I'm gonna hop right into it with probably a game I'm likely to fade overall, with the Jets at Jacksonville. Don't like either one of these teams from a fantasy perspective. Leonard Fournette, expected back, likely to play this week, so obviously that limits TJ Yeldon. Was it Corey Grant or Brandon Wilds, too, had been called up from the practice squad. I mean, I hadn't been... only one of them I had played at all this season had been Yeldon. But the Jets versus the rush have actually struggled a bit. 307 yards and 3 touchdowns they've given up, whereas the Jags, surprisingly, have given up 346 yards and a touchdown. So if I am going to target one of these two teams, it's going to be on the ground. Jags are number 3 overall in terms of versus the pass. They've given up 513 yards through 3 games, less than 200 yards a game, only 2 touchdowns through the air to 1 interception, whereas the Jets have given up 612 yards, still not bad, 3 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. So regardless, I really don't like either one of these quarterbacks. Running back, TJ Yeldon with Fournette likely coming back, not going there. Crowell's still way too underpriced. Now, I know last week it was very touchdown dependent, and he's been very touchdown dependent because in week 2 he didn't score and he only put up 6 fantasy points. But I think, last week he saw 16 carries, and granted the Jets were trying to play not to lose the game as opposed to win it. But I think the Jets are going to try to control the clock, try to keep Jacksonville's defense on the field as long as possible, try to tire them out. The best way to do that is on the ground. Jets can keep rotating receivers to block. They have Terrell Pryor is a big wide receiver. Jermaine Kearse is a very good run-blocking wide receiver. Quincy Enunwa usually plays in the slot, but he's another big guy who, you could put outside and have him block. And then they could throw Robbie Anderson in now and again just to, mix it up and give a different look. So they could potentially wear down these DBs. And I like them to do that with Powell and Crowell. Both of them a bit underpriced, 3,800 and 3,700, and I think you could play either one of them. Honestly, I don't... Powell, with his passing game prowess, he caught a touchdown last week. Crowell's not used at all in the pass game. He's, what does he have? I think he's got 6 catches on the year, which is average out to 2 a game. He's got 4 on the year, so not great, but considering Powell is the passing back, not terrible either. And at their price range, for some value, if you're trying to go stars and scrubs, they're worth a play. Leonard Fournette at 7K, I need to see it from him first. I need to see that he's healthy. I can't just go off of his past. When he has been in there, he's been productive, but we're going on. He played one half of a quarter in week 1, and maybe he's played a quarter's worth of football since last year with the preseason and now and the little bit of time in week 1. So I just can't go there for 7K. These wide receivers, I'm not interested. I guess if I'm going anywhere, I'm gonna take a stab at D.D. Westbrook, just because he's been seeing a lot of time out of the slot, which means he'd get Buster Screen, and Buster Screen's best position is at the slot. But that's where the Jets are most beatable, considering Mo Claiborne's been a consistent, very good corner, and then you have Tremaine Johnson opposite of him. So if you want to beat the Jets through the air, through the slots, probably the best way to do it. And D.D. Westbrook, I think he needs more snaps. I think in 3 wide sets he needs to line up in the slot, and in 2 wide sets he should be on the outside. But they did sign Moncrief to I think a $6 million deal in the offseason. Give DD another year to progress. So him and Enunwa are the only ones I'm looking at. The only reason I consider Enunwa is because of the chemistry he has with Darnold, and the fact that Enunwa lines up in the slot. They'll even line him up at tight end at times. So they get creative with where they line him up, so he's going to see his targets. And Sam Darnold, he'll force him the ball anyway. So, that's not the best thing that we want, but we're not playing Darnold. But Enunwa at 4,300, if the Jets do score a touchdown through the air, it's likely going to be to Quincy Enunwa or one of the running backs. And, if he does go out and put up an 8 or 9, it's not going to kill you at 4,300. Tight ends, nah, I'm not interested there. Both of these defenses are in play. I don't pay that much for defenses. We saw it with the Vikings last week. They were 4,300. Look what they did. The Jaguars last week were 4,000. Look what they did. Now they have a much more favorable matchup this week with a rookie quarterback on the road, but still, I'm not paying 4,100 for that defense. If I want exposure to a defense in this game, I'm going opposite, and I'm taking the Jets. You see that 13 fantasy points per game. Most of that is still from week 1 against Detroit, which that's not going to be the norm for the Jets. But realistically, we can expect 7 to 12 points from them, and this is a favorable matchup. I know what Bortles did to New England, but look what Bortles did the next week against Tennessee. So, he's as Jekyll as Hyde as anybody. So, at 2,400, even if the Jets only do put up, say, 5 fantasy points, it's not going to kill you at that price. Moving over to Miami at New England. Now, interesting stat about Miami that I had seen was they're one of the worst teams against the pass in terms of yards, but then they're one of the toughest in terms of touchdowns to interceptions. Now, the Dolphins have given up 865 yards through the air in the first 3 games. But out of that 865 yards, only 2 have been touchdowns, and they've also had 7 interceptions. So a 2 touchdown to 7 interception ratio is pretty damn good. And on the flip side, the Patriots have given up 789 yards, but 7 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. So it's kind of the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Now, as in terms of run game, I'm not really going to target the run game from either one of these teams. Miami's splitting the carries between Frank Gore and Kenyon Drake. I just can't. I'm not going to play Frank Gore. I'm not going to play Kenyon Drake. In terms of quarterbacks, though, Tom Brady at 6,700. As good as the Dolphins have been, it's been a bend but don't break type of defense, which isn't going to bode well on the road against Tom Brady. And they're coming off of a bad loss on the road. They're coming off a loss before that in Jacksonville. They've lost two games in a row for I think was it the first time in like 4 or 5 years. So I can't go against the Patriots in this game. Tannehill at 5,500 though is intriguing and is worth a dart throw in a GPP. Just because, they could be playing from behind a lot of the game, which means, he could throw the ball 50-something times that game, at least 40. So him at 5,500, Brady at 6,700, both of them are in play for me. We don't see Brady that cheap, and this Dolphins defense has been a bend but don't break, so something's got to give in this matchup, and history tells us to go with Tom Brady. As far as running backs in this game, Kenyon Drake, 5,200. It's a nice price tag, but he's not getting enough volume. He had 5 rushes last game. 5 rushes. That's even before that 11. So he's had 17 touches, 15 touches, and 7 touches. Just for 5,200, I'm not risking it. I do like Sony Michel a bit in this game. The Dolphins have been pretty stingy on the ground, 267 yards through the first 3 games, so they don't give up much on the ground and 2 touchdowns. But we have to take a look. One of those games was against Tennessee, who's been pretty bad on the ground, and Blaine Gabbert came in that game for Marcus Mariota, so it was pretty simple, pretty simple belief from the Dolphins, just load the box and sell out against the run, which obviously ended up working. Which I think we need to take that with a grain of salt in terms of the first game too. But then the fact that they've given up 865 yards is concerning. Like they held Blaine Gabbert to what? It was like 190 yards or something like that because he came in for Mariota, or 100 yards, something like that. But that's a bit concerning because then in the next two games they've given up what? Say it's 100. They gave up 700 yards in the next two games. It's 350 passing yards a game. I don't trust those numbers going into New England against Tom Brady, who's coming off of 2 losses in a row. So James White, 5,400. I like James White, and I like Sony Michel. Rex Burkhead was just placed on IR. So I expect Sony Michel to hop in there and, like last week, kind of take that lead back role. James White sprinkle in on passing downs and get a little bit of work. But James White is the only reliable target right now for Tom Brady. Even Rob Gronkowski's had his struggles in terms of getting open and the line protecting long enough for the plays to develop. So the best way to beat that, is to short passes and run the ball, get the defense on their heels. So James White's in play for me. Josh Gordon, if he plays this week, he's been limited, but I don't like the $6,200 price tag when we haven't seen him. We haven't seen him play in going on 2 weeks. He's on a new team. I mean, I like the upside, but it might be worth the GPP throw if he plays. Just be careful. It's a dangerous route to go because of that price tag. Chris Hogan, I don't play Chris Hogan. I like Philip Dorsett. He still had, I think it was 7 targets last game. He didn't have a catch, but I believe he had 7 targets. 5 targets, 7 in the last 2 before that. So I like this to be a rebound game for Dorsett. Kenny Stills, I don't like his price tag, and now Devontae Parker's back. Parker didn't do much last game, but I expected his role to increase the more comfortable he gets coming back from injury. So, I mean, I guess if you want to beat the Patriots, you can try to beat them deep, and he is a deep ball threat. And I mean, he has been pretty productive in his time, and kind of emerged as their number one, even with Devontae Parker back last week. But he's just not seeing the volume. He's got 13 targets total in 3 games. It's not even 5 targets a game. I can't pay that much for someone who's that home run dependent. Jakeem Grant had a coming out party last week. I mean, I'm not going there. Albert Wilson, same thing. I mean, I don't like any of these weapons for Miami. I can't figure them out. I can't pick them. I've had a hard time with this Miami passing game trying to figure it out this season. Chris Hogan, I won't play Chris Hogan. Danny Amendola hasn't done enough. Unless Josh Gordon plays, I might take a stab with him, but Philip Dorsett's really the only one of the bunch that I like. At tight end, Gronk's obviously in play. He's questionable, and he's been limited, but he'll be in there. The one game this year at home, obviously he went off, but it was against Houston, who struggled to 7 touchdowns to 1 interception on the year. One of the worst teams against the pass. So, Miami might be getting Rashad Jones back this week, so that makes it a little more difficult for Gronk, but I still like him. I can't not fade him. I mean, I can't fade him. Only 7K. Brady's going to be pissed off and want to get back on track, and his reliable go-to receiver is Gronk. As far as defenses, as bad as the Patriots have been, I think they're in play here. I wouldn't go crazy with it or load up on them, but if you want to take a stab with them, at home, same thing, pissed off. They're a lot better than they've shown, especially in the secondary. The Dolphins are 2,000. That's tough to pay that. I know it's dead men, but even then, 11 fantasy points a game, and it's they've been they've actually been solid. Granted, it was against Tennessee and the Jets, so it's like they're still kind of. I'm still kind of trying to figure them out. So it's like, but I'm not willing to bank on them this week going into New England. I know it's a divisional game, and divisional games are usually a little bit closer, but when Miami plays New England tough, it's usually in Miami. In New England, I mean, that's just not an easy place to go into and play. But Miami does play spoilers sometimes, so. But overall, I just can't go. I can't go with Miami. Philly at Tennessee. It's a weird matchup. Carson Wentz looked rusty last week. Lost a fumble through an interception. Did throw for 255 yards and a touchdown. But we're going to need a lot more out of him if we want to, compete in some GPPs with him as our quarterback. So I do think he does get it a bit on track. I do think he turns it around a little bit starting this week. Now, the Titans have been a pretty solid team against the pass. 656 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So, they've been a little stingy there. They're starting Mariota again this week, which I don't like Mariota until he puts it together or has a cupcake matchup or a game that favors him. Even then, I can't play Mariota. I won't play him. Wentz probably going to fade him, but I don't expect Wentz to be too highly owned. So if you do want to take a shot with Wentz, it makes some sense. I think he is better than last week, but it is a somewhat difficult matchup, and it is on the road. But he does get Ajayi back for this game. And Sproles, I think, he's still questionable, but I think he's supposed to come back. No, next week. He's likely going to be out again this week. He hasn't practiced at all this week, so we'll keep an eye on him. Corey Clement's also questionable, but he did practice in a limited fashion, so Ajayi's expected to be back, so they'll get their lead back. And then they'll have Corey Clement as their passing back, assuming he plays and Sproles doesn't. So it's a tough situation to try to figure out. I mean, Ajayi, 5,500. They might try to run the ball to keep Wentz off the field so he doesn't have to try to do too much. I'm probably going to fade this game overall. I mean, I don't like any of the Tennessee backs. I've been burnt by Deion Lewis now 2 weeks in a row. Not willing to go back there. Derrick Henry this offense hasn't shown enough through the air for teams to be scared against the run. So I don't expect that to change much this week. I do expect them to be a little bit better on offense, but not to the point where we can start considering them for to play in GPPs other than dart throws. I do like Nelson Aguilar quite a bit at 5,700. Alshon could return this week. He's been week to week for the last couple weeks, so there's a chance he might return, which I think boosts Aguilar even more because he would likely be on a limited count, but it allows Philly to do more with Aguilar. They can move him around more. So if he plays, I like him at 5,700. Jeffrey at 5,700, not in his return. You got to see him kind of build back up to that. Corey Davis at 5,300, I do like. I saw an interesting stat about him that was he's got something like last year he had all of 100 yards after first contact. This year I think he has 81 already. So Corey Davis at 5,300, probably not going to be played. Seen 24 targets in the first 3 games, which is good for, 8 targets a game. So, I mean, that's decent volume, and now he gets his starting quarterback back. Keep getting these backbacks, but it gets his quarterback back, and, that's a boost compared to, considering he had Blaine Gabbert throwing to him. So, I mean, I don't mind him at 5,300, and I don't think he's going to be owned. I don't expect this game to shoot out, though. That's why I'm not too intrigued with it. Zach Ertz at 6,200. Ertz, I like a lot. He's seen double-digit targets in every game, including Wentz's last game where he saw 10. He doesn't have a touchdown yet this season, but I think that's going to change now that Wentz is back. Him and Wentz had good chemistry last season before Wentz got hurt. I know people might be a little afraid of Godare, but I think that was more so for the matchup against Indy and the fact that they really didn't have any wide receivers or running backs. Like, they couldn't really run the ball, and they didn't have any wide receivers, outside of Aguilar to really do anything. So if they get Jeffrey back, that's going to be a boost to Ertz even more, too. And I think Wentz is going to play better in this game, so that too, is going to be a boost for Ertz. So Ertz at 6,200, I do like. The Eagles at 3,300, it's a little too much for me. It's like, I just don't think, personally think that the Eagles' defense is overrated. Their defensive line is very good, but their secondary isn't. I don't think their secondary is that good. The Titans at 2,300. I'd rather pay the $100 extra and get the Jets, but they're not a terrible play. Again, I don't expect them to be highly owned. So next up, Houston at Indiana. This is one of my favorite games on the slate. I think this game's got some serious shootout potential, and we have some solid quarterback potential here. I do expect them to be owned quite a bit, though. Luck does get to come back to Indy against a Houston team that, like I had mentioned, has struggled against the pass with 7 touchdowns to 1 interception. They've given up 715 yards as well. So Luck at 5,300 or 5,500 is way too cheap, and I'm gonna be loaded up. Like I said, this is one of my favorite games of the slate, so I'm gonna be loading up on Luck and Deshaun Watson. Watson at 6,300 too, and too cheap in my opinion. This to me is a must-win game for the Texans. They're about to, if they lose this game, they fall to 0-4. So 6,300 and 5,500, I'm going to have a lot of these quarterbacks. In terms of the run game, I will probably have 0 exposure to this run game, even if Marlon Mack does play. Still not interested. If you do want somebody from this backfield and you're that serious about trying to get one in, Naheem Hines, I guess, because he's involved in the pass game. But for 3,800, you can get Bilal Powell, or for 3,700, you can get Isaiah Crowell. As far as wide receiver, Hopkins, he's in play. He's questionable, but he had these same injuries last week and played through it, and he'll be fine. T.Y. Hilton at 7K. I'm not a huge fan of the price tag, but still very much in play. And Will Fuller at 6,800, same thing, very much in play. I'm going to have a combination of all these guys. Now, one potential stack that I like is Deshaun Watson with Will Fuller and T.Y. Hilton, or Andrew Luck with Hopkins and Hilton. I just like getting exposure to both sides of the ball, especially in games that I think are going to shoot out. And I do like some indie tight ends in this game as well. But in terms of wide receiver, that's where I'm really looking. Ryan Grant. I guess he's not a bad one-off dart throw play in the GPP, just because he's on the outside looking in terms of the top receivers in this game, and could fly under the radar. Low ownership on him, and he could catch a touchdown. It's not unreasonable to think. And if this game is going to be a shootout, it's going to be a shootout because they're passing through the air. So I don't expect all of that to go to T.Y. Hilton. So Ryan Grant, 4,200, not a bad play. Jack Doyle, I think Ebron's going to start to cut into his time regardless, but he did miss practice again today and is likely to be out. So if that is the case, I know Ebron burned a lot of people last week, but we also have to think of that game too. That was a game on the road in Philadelphia on grass for a team that's used to playing on turf. Ebron's played on turf his entire career, even when he was with Detroit. And they went and played outside in pretty shitty weather too. It was, it was wet, it was raining. It wasn't pouring, but it was rainy. So this week he gets to come back home and play on turf. Andrew Luck indoors, and Andrew Luck at home has always been better in his career. I love Ebron again this week. I know, again, like I said, I know he burned people last week, and hopefully that scares a lot of people off. But in this matchup with the shootout potential at his price tag, too good to pass up. Houston tight ends, I don't even bother trying to figure them out. And neither of these defenses are in play for me. Buffalo at Green Bay. Buffalo coming off of their big win at Minnesota. Aaron Rodgers, 6,800. He's in play, but I'm probably not going to play him. I don't think Buffalo can do it 2 weeks in a row. Josh Allen at 5,100. If you want to take a stab, he's not a bad dart throw. He's not going to kill you if he puts up a 15 to 17 point game. And with his rushing ability and him likely being the red zone running back, so to speak, he's got upside. So at 5,100, it's not a terrible play. Rodgers, if you want to, I think Green Bay does blow this game open, and if they do, they're going to have to do it some way, and that's likely to be through the air. But 6,800 with Brady being 100 less, Deshaun Watson at 63, Andrew Luck at 55. I don't think I'm going to have much of the discount double check guy this week. But flipping over to running back, McCoy's expected to play this week. 5,600. Probably not, but he's got upside at that price. He's still got 20-point upside just on the amount of passes he can catch alone. And if Buffalo can keep this game close, a lot of that's going to be likely due to Josh Allen and LaShawn McCoy. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Buffalo running some read option plays this week between the two of them. And, a lot of screens and short passes, or even lining Shady up in the slot and having him play out of the slot. So 5,600, there is some upside there. The Buffalo backfield, I'm not touching it. I personally like Ty Montgomery the best out of all of them. Not necessarily this week, because I don't think they're going to have to be passing as much. But I think we see Aaron Jones kind of take over for Jamal Williams this week. I mean, Aaron Jones had 7 yards per carry last week compared to Jamal Williams, who isn't, Jamal Williams kind of a workhorse. He didn't have a grinder back. He didn't have a terrible game. He had a 5.8 average yards per carry, but still, Aaron Jones looked like the better back. He received more carries. He had a higher yards per carry. I think it's just a matter of time before he takes over. But with the 3 of them, I don't think you can play any of them. McCoy's really the only playable person in the backfield. Devontae Adams at 7,800. Way too much in this game for me. I like Adams personally, like as a real life player, as a fantasy player. It depends on the matchup. If you expect Green Bay to blow this game open, they're gonna have to do it some way. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the week where they try to run the ball a lot and limit Aaron Rodgers to maybe 30 pass attempts, which he can, or 20, 25 pass attempts, which he can still do plenty of damage in. But, say 8 of those looks go to Devontae Adams for 7,800. Do we want a guy that's only going to see 8 to 9 targets? I don't. I know he's been better at home than he has on the road. It's just, I don't see the 30-point upside with Devontae Adams this week. Randall Cobb at 5,100. Limited in practice with a hamstring injury. Hamstring injuries are always concerning. I think Allison is going to continue to pass him in terms of looks. I think Cobb's going to kind of be used like a Ty Montgomery and really make his impact in games where Green Bay has to pass. I don't think this is going to be the week to take a stab with Cobb or Allison. Allison, I don't mind because of his price tag and because at home, not even just at home, but so far this season, he showed chemistry with Rodgers, and Rodgers has shown that he trusts him a bit. He has no competition for the number 3 receiver. So, 4,700, it won't kill you if he only puts up a 10, but even then, you know, I don't think he has enough upside. I don't think his floor is that bad. I mean, I could see him putting up a one catch for 19 yards. The game flow and the game script, I just don't like the outlook of this game. I'm not going to try and figure out Buffalo's wide receivers. I'm not interested in Buffalo's passing game. If I play Josh Allen, it's because of his rushing ability. As far as tight end, maybe this is the week we see Jimmy Graham have a 2-touchdown game. If he plays, I very well could see that, that he has limited usage except for in the red zone. So, I mean, if you want to take a stab, go for it. But 4,500, I just think there's better options. Defensively, Packers are a bit too much at 3,500. And the Bills on the road in Green Bay, they could be free. I probably still wouldn't take them. Next up, Detroit at Dallas. Dallas is actually favored in this game. But Matt Stafford, 5,700. Dak Prescott, 5,300. Stafford at 57 is intriguing. The Cowboys have actually been pretty tough against the pass. They're a top 5 defense against the pass so far this year. Only giving up 548 yards with 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. And they have that fearsome D-line. We saw Stafford and the Lions struggle with pressure in week 1 and week 2. So I don't have the utmost confidence in the Lions to kind of keep playing the way they did last week against New England. I think they come back down to earth this week. And I think this game's somewhat close. I don't expect a shootout by any means. But 5,700, and he's got a ton of weapons, Stafford does. So he's not a terrible play this week. And it seems to me that the value this week is going to be at quarterback, that there's a lot of quarterbacks at, 6,500 and below. Dak Prescott at 53. No, you can't play Dak right now with the way that he's playing. Zeke is probably, I don't want to say my favorite, but he's one of my favorite running backs on this slate this week. Detroit struggled on the ground. Against the run, They're dead last. And they've given up 448 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. They got burnt in week 1 for a 62-yard touchdown from from Isaiah Crowell. And in week 2, they got burnt for a 64-yard touchdown from Matt Breida. So they have solid, they can get pass rush, and their linebackers are good in terms of in space and coverage, but they're smaller and they're faster, so they're not so much against the ground and pound, which is exactly what Dallas is. So I love Zeke this week, and he's catching, he's seen a decent amount of looks out of the backfield, so he's one of my favorite of the week. Golden Tate, 66, he's in play. Kenny Golladay at 65, he's in play. Marvin Jones at 52, he's in play. I think, you could play any 3 of them. Kenny Golladay has been the best so far in terms of fantasy point production. Golden Tate's seen the most looks. So it's, I think obviously Tate and Golladay have the most upside. But Marvin Jones Jr. Can strike for a touchdown at any time. So 5,200, there's value there with Marvin Jones Jr., but the Cowboys have been very tough against the pass on the flip side. So I probably won't have too much exposure to Detroit in the passing game. I'll probably have a couple teams just to, because I think they're a little bit, Stafford's a little bit too cheap. And some of these wide receivers, I'll probably, I'll use Golladay as a one-off. I'll use Golden Tate as a one-off. But I don't like this game for any stacks. On the Dallas side, if you're going to play a receiver, it's Cole Beasley, but even there, I'm not going there. I don't like this Dallas passing game at all. As far as wide receiver, tight ends, no tight ends are playable. I think both defenses are playable, and they're 25 and 2,400. The Cowboys, like I had mentioned, are a top 5 defense against the pass this year, so that's what the Lions do well. So I mean, at 2,400 and 2,500 for either one of these defenses, I think they're both in play. I'm gonna have exposure to both of them. This is my range where I like to settle in for defenses. So there's worse plays on defense for more money, in my opinion, than either one of them. So flipping over to Tampa at Chicago. We saw Ryan Fitzpatrick come crashing down to earth a bit last week. While he still threw for over 400 yards, he did throw his 3 interceptions. I don't even think he's been named starter yet. I don't know if they named a starter. I think signs point towards Fitzpatrick, but I don't know if they've named a starter yet. Before I did this, I hadn't seen anything. So if he starts, sure. At 6,200, Chicago's strong in terms of getting after the passer and not even stopping the run, just getting after the passer, because and their secondary has been susceptible so far this year. Trubisky at 5,200. I think this is his coming out party for the season in terms of passing. He's got 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions on the year. I think we could see him top 280 yards to 300 this week with, say, 2 to 3 touchdowns to 1 to 2 interceptions. I think he has a chance to have his best week of the season this week. So at 5,200, I don't think anybody's going to play him. I think he could be a sneaky play, but I don't think we need to, considering all the value at quarterback already. Jameis Winston, if he plays over Fitz, I need a week to see what Jameis is if he does start before I can play him. Running backs, Jordan Howard at 6,800. Maybe this is the week he goes off, but teams just aren't afraid of Mitch Trubisky. So I think this is the week where Mitch kind of has to do his thing as opposed to Jordan Howard. I think Howard could still have a good game, but at 6,800, I don't see it. I don't see that price. I understand it's a favorable matchup at home. He's seeing the touches, but he's topped. His best game this season is 16 fantasy points, and we're putting him at 6,800 just because of a matchup. I mean, maybe if I have, for my flex, I have 6,800 left over, and I don't have him in any teams, I might throw him in as a dart. But, I mean, I know it's a very favorable matchup. We haven't seen the production from him yet, and we haven't seen teams fear Trubisky enough for Howard to be in that range. If he was in the 6,200 range or 62 to 64, okay. But 6,800 is a lot to pay. That's a lot to pay up for someone whose best game this season is 16 fantasy points. Tariq Cohen, no. Peyton Barber, no. Going up against very, very tough defensive front. I'm not interested there. Wide receiver Mike Evans, 7,900. A little pricey, but I mean, rightfully so. The guy's killed it this year. Again, probably going to be pretty low owned. I mean, unless people are hopping on this Tampa train, which I don't think, I think most knowledgeable fantasy players understand that, a lot of this is the game script, a little fluky. I love Mike Evans. I hope Mike Evans has a huge game. I have him on my season-long fantasy team, but I don't know if I can pay $8,000 for him in this matchup. On the road. I see it's tough because it's I keep saying this, but each week they've gone out and they've proven me wrong. So it's, 79. Again, you want to use him like with Jordan Howard. You want to use him as a dart throw, sure. Am I going to make him a staple in my lineups and build around him? No. Allen Robinson at 5,900. I love Allen Robinson this week. I think that's way too cheap of a price tag for him. 5,900 while he's seeing double-digit targets on average. So, he's got 35 targets in 3 games. Yeah, he's seeing like 12 targets a game. It's pretty good. So, 59. I like Allen Robinson a lot. Deshaun Jackson, I don't play Deshaun Jackson because of his, he's pretty one-dimensional, home run threat, and I mean, he's got somewhat of a favorable matchup, but I don't chase. I hate chasing players like that. He just doesn't get it. I don't like going after targeting players that don't get a lot of targets. So, I mean, if I happen to come in and have 5,700 left and don't have him in a team, maybe, but I'm not, I'm not actively seeking to get him in or saying that he needs to be in a lineup. Chris Godwin at 45. Godwin, I like. He's not seeing the exact, the target volume I'd like, but he's making the most of it. He does have, 5 catches, and 3 catches. I think he has 2 touchdowns on the year as well. 3, he's caught one in every game. So, I'd rather save the 1,200 and go after Godwin than go with Deshaun Jackson. Taylor Gabriel kind of intrigues me at 3,900. They've been giving him a lot of looks, and with his speed and playmaking ability, I feel like it's just a matter of time before he breaks a big play and scores a touchdown. So this week against this defense very well could be the week, and he's only 3,900. And like I said, he's seen a lot of work. That's the big thing, is he's got 22 targets in 3 games this season, and he's the clear-cut number 2 receiver for the Bears. And Anthony Miller's doubtful. So I do like Taylor Gabriel a bit this week as a bit of a deep sleeper. At tight end, Trey Burton, sure, don't mind him. His price has come down a bit to 3,900. Don't love him. O.J. Howard, however, is one of my favorite tight ends on the week. The workload just goes up and up and up so far this season. And last week he's had his best week of the season in terms of catches and overall use in the offense. Granted, Fitzpatrick threw the ball 50 times, but the week before they had 4 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown. O.J. Howard's a big playmaking threat and is a matchup nightmare. He's big bodied, so you put a safety on him. He can you throw a jump ball to him. He's winning that 9 times out of 10, and it's tough for those smaller players to tackle him. So he's kind of has a stranglehold on the tight end job. I know Brate was involved a little bit more last week, but I don't know. I like O.J. Howard a lot this week at 3,500. I think O.J. Howard and Eric Ebron will probably be my 2 most played tight ends this week. As far as defenses, I think you can play both these defenses. I don't like the Bucs defense, and they keep losing the play each week. They lose somebody else. This past week they lost Chris Conte. Week 1 they lost Vernon Hargreaves for the season. Conte this past weekend is now out for the season, so it's I'm likely to fade him, and if I want at the same price as the New York Jets at 2,400. So, but the Bears at 26, I love the Bears price at 26. So I'll probably have a lot of Bears, and that price it's a little too tempting to pass up for me. Next up, Cincy at Atlanta. This is another one of those high-scoring matchups that I have on the slate that I think we'll see. Matt Ryan, again, this is a case of quarterbacks being too cheap. Matt Ryan, 6,100. Andy Dalton, 5,400. I think it's time we start taking Andy Dalton seriously this season as a fantasy and a DFS quarterback. He's got weapons on weapons. AJ Green is expected to play. Joe Mixon, I'm not sure. I think is still questionable. Tyler Boyd's emerged. He still has John Ross, one of the fastest guys in the NFL. And Dalton can throw the ball far. Last week he threw 4 interceptions, but it was on the road in Carolina, outdoors against a decent defense. This Atlanta defense is banged up. There's still Keanu Neal's done for the season. Deion Jones is out, and with the 2 of them being out, with what we've seen teams be able to do in the air against Atlanta so far this season, with those 2 being out, I don't think it changes this week when you have a top wide receiver who's emerged and has over 100 yards in 2 straight weeks, and has a speedster like John Ross, and potentially Gio Bernard or Joe Mixon coming out of the backfield with Tyler Eifert at tight end. So, Andy Dalton has weapons on weapons. So 5,400, and I expect this game to shoot out a bit. I'm going to have exposure to both of these quarterbacks, in pretty heavy amounts. I really like the passing game for both these teams. should. I'm just reading this quick because I hadn't gotten a Joe Mixon update. I did actually early in the day, but it said that I don't remember if it said he returned to practice or if he didn't practice. But it says Mixon did not practice Thursday. He indicated that his knee feels great as he proceeds with running, cutting, and conditioning. So he won't play this week. And Gio Bernard is questionable and was limited in practice, but I expect him to play. I think he'll see a hefty workload this week as well. I'll have some Gio if he plays. I mean, 6,300 is a lot. But I do think he could make some noise, especially with his passing game ability and Joe Mixon being out again. Devontae Freeman practiced it in a limited capacity. If he returns and we know something concrete beforehand that they say, okay, he's going to play this amount of snaps or he's going to play, he's going to be on a pitch count. Then I'm fading him and not playing him, and I won't play Tevin Coleman either. But if he's ruled out, I'm going to fire up Tevin Coleman. Flipping over to wide receiver. Last week, I had said I don't mind Ridley. I think he's a solid play. This week, I'm on the flip side, fading Ridley completely, and I love Julio. I think people are going to be scared off of Julio because of last week, and they're going to be on Calvin Ridley because of last week. I don't like Calvin Ridley. I mean, I like Calvin Ridley. I just don't like him this week. I don't like rookie running backs, rookie wide receivers. They always hit a rough patch. Once they make some noise, or if they make some noise, then defenses plan against them and kind of negate them. And he's 4,900. I could pay 300 less for Tyler Boyd, who in my opinion has a more guaranteed workload than Calvin Ridley does. AJ Green will play 7,500. Way too cheap for AJ Green. I'm going to have a lot of exposure to AJ Green. I like a Andy Dalton, Julio Jones, AJ Green stack, or potentially a Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and AJ Green. I think you could make that lineup. Obviously, have no problems making that. But I'm off Calvin Ridley this week. If I do take a stab, it might be on Mohamed Sanu, who did see 7 targets last week, and that was a shootout. I expect this game to be more in the range of the Carolina game than last week, where it was 31-24 as opposed to 43-27. I don't think it gets that high. I think it ends up being like a 30-20 or 27-24 type game. I don't think it hits 30s and 40s this week, but it does have that kind of shootout potential. This is a game that's going to probably have high ownership, but for good reason. At tight end, Tyler Eifert's 38. I don't mind taking a stab with him. He is playing decent snaps, but he's still very touchdown dependent, as is Austin Hooper, but Hooper's $900 less. So if he burns you, it's not going to hurt you as bad as Eifert is. So you could start off with Eifert and then drop down to Hooper if you need the $900 elsewhere. Defenses, I'm not playing either one of these defenses. Like I said, I think this game shoots out, so I just not worth it when there's other defenses in better positions that are around the same price points. Seattle at Arizona. The end of Sam Bradford is upon us. Josh Rosen named the starter for this week. Tough matchup, even though at home gets a full week of practice, is 4,500. Hey, if you want to throw a GPP dart out there, be my guest. I liked him at UCLA, but the NFL is a different animal. I'm not going to base his performance in the preseason off of what he's going to do or could do. It's entirely different. So I'm going to probably fade him. I'm going to fade him. I might throw him in a team just to try to be super contrarian in case he does pull some magic and pulls a rabbit out of the hat. Russell Wilson at 56. This one intrigues me because Doug Baldwin returned to practice this week and could play. If he plays, I like Russell Wilson at 5,600. That's too cheap for a guy who does have decent rushing upside, but hasn't taken off much this year. I kind of expect that to change as the season goes on because this offensive line isn't very good. Last week he didn't have to run because Chris Carson ran the ball 30-something times. I also don't expect that to happen again. Pete Carroll is notorious for changing up game plans like that after something works. But I don't hate Russell Wilson at 5,600 if Doug Baldwin plays. At running back, David Johnson. I've been burned by David Johnson twice now, in week 1 and week 2. Week 3, I only had him in 1 or 2 teams. I wouldn't consider him burning me. But this week, at 6,600, I think it might finally be time that David Johnson finally hit his floor in terms of pricing. I think he gets it turned around this week. I think the offense is going to be a bit reinvigorated with Josh Rosen at the helm, which does help out David Johnson in the pass game and in the run game. So David Johnson at 6,600 is very intriguing to me. Chris Carson, 46. I know, like I said, he had the 30 carries last week. He had 100 yards. I don't think Pete Carroll runs him 30 times again or even close to that. So I need to see it more consistently. Now, at 4,600, he won't kill you if he doesn't. But, again, I think you can go to Bilal Powell or Isaiah Crowell for cheaper, and it'd be a bit more beneficial. So, moving over to wide receiver, if Doug Baldwin plays at 5,500, sure. If he doesn't play, Tyler Lockett at 51, sure. Larry Fitzgerald, I like a lot this week. 5,000 is way too cheap, and Josh Rosen is going to, I think, find out early in this game that Larry Fitzgerald is his best option in the passing game, and kind of, I don't want to say, but kind of forces the ball his way. Christian Kirk had a big week last week, 3,700. I don't mind him. He's a dart play. A dart throw, GPP dart throw. It's, I wouldn't make him a focal point or say I have to get him in the lineup, but he is a decent play this week. Will Dissly at tight end, 3,100, kind of burned people last week. I didn't play him, but again, I'm probably going to fade him again, especially if Doug Baldwin comes back. I don't like relying on those people who have, are very reliant on touchdowns or big plays. I like to see the volume. Ricky Seals-Jones at 29. Rookie tight ends. Rookie quarterbacks do like to go to their tight ends. So, and he is 2,900. Did catch a 35-yard touchdown last week. Is big, athletic. Makes some sense again as a GPP play. Defensively, Seahawks at 32, going up against a rookie quarterback. Understandable. I'm probably not going there. The Cardinals had a good week last week because their offense finally, could muster up some sort of offense so they weren't on the field the whole game. But it still wasn't an overly impressive performance. Yes, they held Trubisky to under 200 passing yards, but Mitch Trubisky, and they had 1 interception. They should have had 2 or 3. It's Mitch Trubisky, who this year has shown, and the only reason I say that is because he's shown where, every single game this season, he's shown where there could have been 3 or 4 interceptions that didn't happen that probably should have. So, numbers can be a bit misleading like that, but, the Cardinals this week, they know it's a divisional game. They know the Seahawks. I understand this, it is new coaching, which does worry me a bit, but, at 2,600, I think you can do better though, but, at home, momentum, quarterback change. They still have Patrick Peterson, Calais Campbell. Again, I think there's worse out there, but I think there's better too. Moving over to Cleveland at Oakland, Baker Mayfield making his first career NFL start, the number 1 overall pick, who led the Browns comeback against the Jets last week. No, I'm not playing him. I hope a lot of people do play him. Hopefully he doesn't go off. But David Carr, we'll start with David Carr. David Carr I'm definitely not playing. David Carr hasn't looked good this year. Has a tough matchup. This Cleveland defense is legit. What worries me about Baker Mayfield is having to go cross-country, game on the road. But his scrambling ability and rushing ability and the way the team rose to play for him last week, that does raise an eyebrow a bit. And again, maybe I'll probably throw him in a team and see how it goes. But I'm not gonna, there's still luck for 55. Andy Dalton's 54. You got 6,100 for Matt Ryan. So there's a lot of really good players out there in that. That there's a lot of value at quarterback this week. Running back Carlos Hyde, he had the 2 touchdowns last week. Maybe. I mean, he's had 20 carries plus twice this year. Hasn't done too much with it, but I do think Baker Mayfield opens up the field a bit more for him than Tyrod does. So, worth a stab. Other than that, I'm not. I just can't play Marshawn Lynch. I mean, the price isn't bad, but his I feel like his ceiling is 70 rushing yards. Like that's if he tops 70 rushing yards, that's a good game. Very touchdown dependent against a tough defense. I'm not too interested in Marshawn. Moving over to wide receiver, Jarvis Landry at 74. Bit pricey, but for good reason. This Oakland defense struggles against the pass. Jarvis Landry showed some chemistry with Baker Mayfield last week and showed his hands. And that he is more than just a 8 to 10 yard route runner, and that he can make plays down the field happen. So I think the Cleveland starts to use him a bit more in that manner. So 7,400 is a bit pricey, but I do like him this week, and I will have some Jarvis Landry. Amari Cooper I can't figure out, and I probably won't have him. I think Jordy Nelson was a bit of a fluke last week. Callaway's been a little too much of a deep ball home run threat. That's it. Last week, he had a decent amount he did have 11 targets. I still, I need to see more from him. I need to see more consistency. Again, rookie wide receiver. I don't like rookie wide receivers. Martavis Bryant is probably who I like the most out of this wide receiver group outside of Jarvis Landry, as crazy as it sounds. Last week he did have a red zone target. It did get picked off, but it was a terrible throw by Carr. He shouldn't have forced it. And he knows the offense. He was with them in training camp in the preseason. Has 9 targets through 2 games. Has that home run ability. 3,400, probably not going to be played. I mean, Martavis isn't a bad one-off. He's not a bad deep sleeper. Again, if you want to do a stars and scrubs team, he's perfect for the scrub spot. Tight end, Jared Cook, 41. Cleveland's been one of the toughest teams against tight ends this year. Outside of his week 1 game, it's been pretty modest. He is 4,100. Probably, if I do have any of them, I'll throw them in one. But I like O.J. Howard, and I like Zach Ertz, and I like Eric Ebron better than him. Flipping over to the defense, the Raiders are averaging 1 fantasy point a game. They put up 1-4-0. I can't do it. The Browns at 29. Sure, if you want. I think it's a little too high, even in this matchup. They do still have to go across country. They do still have to go against cross country and play on the road with a rookie quarterback, and that could go, great, or that could go terrible. So probably fade the Browns defense too. If you do play it, it's not a bad play. One of my other favorite game on the slate, the New Orleans Saints at the Giants. Drew Brees 6,600, Eli Manning 5,600. Drew Brees has been on an absolute tear, but let's keep in mind that all 3 of those games have been indoors. Drew Brees has notoriously been very, very good indoors. In fact, he's 5-2 in his career against the Giants indoors, I believe, while he's 1-2 on the road against them. No, I'm sorry. I can't remember the stat. That's going to piss me off now, but I can't remember the exact stat. But I know he's 1-2 against the Giants in Giant Stadium. He lost in 2016 to the Giants, 16-13. He lost in 2012, I believe it was, 52-27. So, and he did struggle against the Jets a couple years ago too, where that game was also in at the Jets. So they will be going outdoors. And before you say anything about the weather and that he played later in the season, the game where he lost 16-13 was September 18th. So it was close to this date. I think the Giants win this game outright, but I do think it's a bit of a shootout. I really like this game from a fantasy standpoint. I like Breeze in this game. I don't love him. I like him. Eli, I don't mind taking a stab with Eli. He looked good last week. I know Ingram's out, but that just means Sterling Shepard slots in, picks up Ingram's targets. Red Ellison caught a touchdown last week. He still has Saquon in the backfield. So this is still an explosive offense for the Giants. Alvin Kamara gets another price increase, gets another $100 increase, now up to now up to 9,600. I mean, we didn't get a price increase the week he put. I mean, we didn't get a price decrease the week he puts up 18 against Cleveland. It's a favorable matchup. 15 catches last week. He's not doing too much on the ground. His yardage totals are 66, 46, and 29, so he's not killing it on the ground. But, I mean, he's got to be in play. I'm not saying you have to jam him in or make it a point to, build every team around him, but there should be some exposure to Kamara every weekend. Saquon at 81 gets a $500 price increase. Starting to kind of price him out. He hasn't top 25 fantasy points yet this year. He has been in the 20s every game. Hasn't topped 20 rushes. So, I don't mind Saquon. I don't hate him, don't mind him. Like, kind of the same thing as Kamara. I'll have some of them, but it's not at that price. It's not a jam him in or force him in the lineup type situation. Michael Thomas at 9,100. Michael Thomas is in play. I think this game shoots out, like I had said. So the passing game, I think, is going to be the reason why. I do think Kamara breaks a touchdown run of 30-plus yards this week, though. I do think he has a better week on the ground than he has this season. Just want to throw that in there. But Michael Thomas at 91. I like Michael Thomas a lot. Odell, one of my favorite wide receiver plays on the week. Going to have a lot of exposure to Odell. The Giants have been doing a good job of moving him around the offense and having, not being predictable and just line him up on the outside and say, here, go one-on-one all game. They're moving him around to the slot. They're moving around the left, the right. They're putting him all over. So, at 8,700, he hasn't had that huge game yet, and I think we could see that. He does have to deal with Marshawn Lattimore, which, Lattimore did do a number on Julio Jones last week. But Odell is a much quicker wide receiver than Julio Jones is and much more difficult to shut down for an entire game. So Odell at 87 I like. My favorite play, and I think the chalk for this week, or the most owned player this week, is going to be Sterling Shepard after what he did last week, and Evan Ingram went down. 4,900. I'm going to be loading up on him as well. So, but that's about it from this passing game. Ted Ginn at 46 too, if you want to take a stab with Ted Ginn, I don't mind it. But in terms of targets and the volume that I like, he doesn't get it. He just doesn't see enough. And Cam Meredith kind of come back. They have the other Traquan Smith, who's been playing more of a role. Yeah, he hasn't seen much targets, but he's been on the field more. So it's just, there's a lot there. If I do take a value receiver from New Orleans, it'll probably be Ted Ginn. Tight end, Ingram's out. Ben Watson's 33. I like Ben Watson this week. His price has come down and gone up and come down, gone up. So it's like, he hasn't found his groove yet in terms of production or what he really is going to be. He's been pretty consistent in terms of, catches and yardage and targets. He's averaging about 3 or 4 targets a game, about 4 or 5 targets a game. So, 3,300, not bad, but I'd rather go the other route and take Red Ellison for 2,700 in the same game. We'll save some money. We know Evan Ingram's out. So that kind of opens a bit, a bit more up, opens up a bit more for Red Ellison in terms of targets and possible production. Both of these defenses I'm fading. I think this game shoots out, so I'm not. Neither one of these defenses are in play for me. And the last game of the slate, San Francisco at the Chargers. Jimmy G done for the year. Phillip Rivers 6,500. C.J. Beathard 46. You want to take a stab with C.J. Beathard? I don't mind it. He does have rushing. He has a rushing ability and has rushing upside. So C.J. Beathard at 46, I don't mind it. I can't pay 6,500 for Phillip Rivers in a game that they're likely to blow the chart, blow San Francisco out. And yes, they're gonna have to get to that point, but how much upside does he realistically have in a game where he may only throw 20 to 25 passes? Melvin Gordon at 8,300. I don't know. I'll probably have a little bit of them. I'll have some of them. If I'm, at his price point, I think I'd rather Saquon for 200 less in a game. Better game script, better possible game flow. This game could be over at the third quarter, and we see Eckler for the second half. So that worries me a bit. Matt Breida at 5,800. Breida did return to practice. I like Breida this week. 5,800 is a little bit pricey, but I think he'll go under the radar. And honestly, I think he could see 10 targets with C.J. Beathard coming in at quarterback. Alfred Morris just doesn't catch passes, and Alfred Morris is limited as it is. So I mean, if he's limited anyway on Sunday, they're going to try to get, and the game's somewhat close, they're going to try to get Breida as many touches as possible in terms of the backfield. So I like Breida. I don't like Alfred Morris. Austin Eckler at 4,200. I don't mind him this week. I think a lot of people are going to be off of him after last week, and they see, he's kind of very game, dependent on the game script. If it's going to be a shootout, he's going to see his targets and he's going to see his touches. Even with Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon just touches the ball so many times that he comes off the field a good amount. And Phillip Rivers loves checking down to his running back. So Eckler in this matchup, he could come in for Melvin Gordon, halfway through the third or in the third quarter and still put up 15 to 20 fantasy points at 4,200 against this defense. Wide receiver, Keenan Allen at 83. Little too pricey for me. He did miss practice today with a knee issue and something about a tooth. I don't think the tooth will be an issue for Sunday, but the knee injury is something to keep an eye on. See if he practices Friday. If he doesn't practice Friday, then there's some cause for concern. If he does practice Friday, he's likely in there, but at 8,300, I think it's just a little bit too pricey. Marquise Goodwin at 4,800. I don't mind him. Again, if you're going to do a C.J. Beathard team, why not pair him with Marquise Goodwin? It gives you some late game exposure, and it makes you contrarian in a GPP, which is something you always need to be if you're looking to win one. So, Marquise Goodwin at 4,800 did catch a touchdown last week. Did have good chemistry with Jimmy G though, so that'll be curious to see him with Beathard. So, I probably won't go too crazy with him though, just because I want to see the chemistry aspect. The only other person I'm considering in this game from a pass catching standpoint, wide receiver, is Mike Williams. Especially if Keenan Allen is limited or out, I like Mike Williams even more. But even if Keenan Allen does play, Mike Williams isn't going to come off the field, if the game gets out of hand or, he's still going to see his looks. He's not going to go crazy. He's not going to see 7, 8, 9, 10 in this game. He did see 7 last week, but they were trailing against the Rams most of the game. To me, he's overtaken Tyrell Williams as a Phillip Rivers target, a Phillip Rivers receiver, so keep an eye on him. He's 4,500. He has gotten a $700 price increase from 2 weeks ago. So kind of take it, I wouldn't go too crazy with him, but he isn't a bad play, especially if Keenan is limited or out in any way, shape, or form in this game. George Kittle at 4,200. I don't mind Kittle this week. You have a young quarterback coming in. Young quarterbacks tend to favor their tight ends. So Kittle at 42. I might have a couple of them, but I'm not going to go too crazy. The Chargers at 3,900. I don't like the Chargers defense. I said coming into the season, I didn't like the Chargers defense. I had them finishing 7-9. I don't like their defense for 3,900 in this matchup. As much as, as favorable as it is, that's too much. And San Francisco's defense just isn't playable. They've been atrocious this year. But that's gonna do it. Thanks for joining me. Be back next week with week 5. Wish everybody luck. You can follow me on Twitter at Millsy021. You can follow the Nosebleed section on Twitter at TNBS021. You want to talk some shit, you want to debate, whatever it may be, you can hit me up on Twitter. And that's going to do it for me. Thanks for joining.